Hello, all you positive heads. Brandon and Dalien here with you. Welcome to the last episode in our week-long experiment of doing daily podcast. Well, at least Monday through Friday. What's up, Dalien? How goes it?
Doing well over here. Happy Friday, everybody.
Yeah. Why are you wearing a diaper only today?
A diaper only?
Yeah.
How can you see through this lead shield I've got in front of me? You've got x-ray vision, huh?
Okay. All right. I guess that's not a diaper. I guess that's more of like a toga.
It's my alien garment. It looks like a diaper to you humans.
Is there such thing as a toga? Is that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I'm making sure. Sometimes.
Oh, that's right. You never went to a fraternity.
That's true. Yeah. Well, I actually went to a Christian school, and that I'm proud to say I got kicked out of. But
it's one of your biggest points of pride.
That's a big bullet point on my resume. We had social clubs, so it was guys and girls together. So it was a sort of our cliques were combined. So that was interesting. That's
pretty fascinating. Conservative Christian school, but it was also unisex, huh?
Right.
In my hometown, in Chile, where I'm from, in South America. The Catholic Church is a big presence, of course. There's a lot of schools that are boys only or girls only. I'm sorry, that was the case until only a few years ago. That's all ended. Actually, all Catholic schools are now unisex.
Yeah, it's interesting. You know, of course, I went to this Christian school I was excited. My older sister went there. It was 15 hours away from home. I just was like, yeah, I can get, that far away from my parents and start living it up. Well, it was extremely conservative. I was one of the crazy party kids, which wasn't very crazy at all. But according to, the standards they set there, it was pretty, I guess I was considered on the wilder side. So
you were like Sean Penn to them.
Oh, yeah. I ended up actually getting kicked out. Funny enough, I mean, they had social clubs with boys and girls, but you couldn't have a girl in your dorm room, for example. And I got the final straw with me getting kicked out was sneaking my girlfriend out the side stairwell. And coincidentally, the dorm mother happened to be coming in this side entrance at that moment because we had a basketball game and someone had parked in her designated parking spot from another school visiting. And so she came in this weird entrance she normally wouldn't come in as I'm sneaking my girlfriend at the time out. Called into the dean's office the next day. And we ended up getting kicked out, which led to me moving to Nashville, which led to me meeting you. So, it's one of those things happen for a reason. You don't really know, how that one event, had she not come in the side door at that moment, how would my life have altered? Would I have stayed there another, year and a half worth of school? I think I had left at the time and not moved 3 hours away to another, transferred to another school. And so it's really interesting when you look back on little moments like that in your life that kind of steered you to a certain path, and that's certainly what happened. With that little instance.
Yeah. Sneaking your girlfriend into this conservative college got you heading down the road to perdition because you would be joining a rock band and living that whole decadent lifestyle only a few years later.
To Satan.
Yes. How is he, by the way?
Oh, he's still very fiery, very fiery. He still spews fire from his mouth and ears at times. Last time I checked. So, back to what we should be talking about here. Let's get things rolling today with the
positive story of the day.
Was that an angel that just flew through the room?
Oh, I think I feel it. Beautiful. I feel lighthearted.
Oh, it must be all that talk about Satan. We
right.
summoned the good guys.
It brought him around.
Protection. Dan, you have a good story for us?
Oh, yes. I found something that I thought was really cool, really appealing to me for a couple of reasons. These are really cool designs that were created by a British designer called Toby Allen. Toby Allen is a pretty accomplished illustrator. He's a graduate of the Plymouth College of Art, I believe. And he's also someone who's relatively open about living with depression and anxiety. His designs, tend to be more a little bit like a classic children's illustration or children's fairy tale type illustration combined with like a modern thing, with like a Pokemon thing almost, right? So it's really cool from that standpoint. But these designs are actually extra cool because they're monsters that are designed to be sort of like a incarnation of mental disorder. depression, anxiety, dissociative personality disorder, a whole host of them. I think he's designed about 20 monsters, and now they've been turned into plush toys. They've been made into plushies, and there's in fact a Kickstarter campaign going on right now. I think there's only 4. The first 4 of these designs have been made into plushies, and I think that they're only prototypes right now.
Yeah, I'm looking it up. They're pretty cool looking, actually.
Yeah, they're really, really cool looking. Emily Monahan is the girl who's behind the Kickstarter, and I think she's the one that's working on actually making, translating the designs from illustration to like a physical thing, right?
Right.
But they're both really cool from the design standpoint alone, and also just because of what they represent. Getting people to talk about mental illness is really, really valuable, and also to put sort of like a fun spin on it, really. Yeah.
Yeah, well, it goes to so many levels too, because you have, I don't know if you'd consider depression mental illness, but
they certainly are.
Yeah, I mean, they do consider it as.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, obviously that would be a very mild, if you call that mental illness. I mean, a lot of people, everyone at some moment or another experiences depression. Some people for extended lengths of time, and it becomes a big part of their life and a big battle. For others, they're depressed for 15 minutes when they didn't get the sandwich at the Subway that they wanted because they were out of that particular bread. But so there's different levels of this stuff. But yeah, it's something that I think everyone can certainly relate to. I in my own family, I've had someone connected that has some pretty serious mental illness, and it's really wild to witness. I saw something recently that is a shamanic view of mental illness. Have you seen this? There's an article recently. I think I saw it on wakingtimes.com. I don't know if that's where it originated, but here, pulling it up. It's so, in this shamanic view, mental illness signals the birth of a healer, is explaining this particular shaman in this article. Thus, it says here, thus mental disorders are spiritual emergencies, spiritual crises, and need to be regarded as such to aid the healer in being born. Mm-hmm. So what those in the West are viewing as mental illness, this particular guy is saying it's regarded as good news from the other world. They need to get, that they need to get through the crisis, first. And they've been chosen as some sort of a medium. And that's, wow, that's definitely a different kind of perspective. So, and in their case, these indigenous people are talking about how they'll gather around and really try and help the individual and look at them through this lens. And what a different, spin. For me personally, the person connected to me in my own life is an individual who I can relate to this kind of concept, because when this person has become very fixated on being like the center of the universe, like all things revolve around them. Like if a movie comes on, oh yeah, that movie's about me, and they're essentially robbing me by not giving me royalties because everything is about me. I am the alpha and the omega of this planet, and it's almost like in her case, it's like a twisted. It's like a twisted understanding of the oneness of all things. It's like if you saw it through a really dirty lens, so to speak, like where instead of realizing you're connected to all things and love is the underlying current of existence, it's more like I am all things, I am everything, and you all are my pawns, my slaves. And so it becomes this like super narcissistic, twisted kind of dark version of reality. All these people that are that are doing her wrong, the Vatican, and people like that, they all need to be killed and destroyed. And it's really sad to see, but I can, from personal experience, take this shamanic view and say, yeah, I can see where this person has just got it twisted. It's like there's a blockage to fully understanding the ultimate nature of reality that's turned into this kind of dark, twisted, narcissistic version of it all.
Right. Yeah, I'm not sure I agree entirely with the idea, although I know that there's quite a few people in like the healing professions that seem to think so, that in order to become a spiritual healer or a shaman-like figure of some sort, you have to endure some sort of major trauma or trial. And like I said, I'm not really sure that that's always the case, that it has to be this way. But I understand the idea behind it. And it really makes a lot of sense. This major trauma or trial is going to essentially force you to just challenge your view of reality, and to reach out into this realm where you can get answers and wisdom that just bypasses everything we know, right? So it's really ideally coming from a higher source.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, that's a really cool story. What was the name of the artist again? And there's a Kickstarter for this now?
Oh, yes. Toby Allen is the original designer of these little monsters. The monsters are actually called Real Monsters.
Huh.
And yes, Real Monsters is the name of the project on Kickstarter. Emily Monahan is the person behind the Kickstarter.
Cool.
But yeah, it's really cool because this whole thing is really just about removing the stigma of talking about mental illness. Yeah. That's one thing that I definitely agree with, because even though, of course, I have my own sort of personal experience with depression. I don't think I'm depressed now, but I've been dealing with that in my life.
Sure.
Pretty much since childhood. So the one thing that I know is extremely crucial that these guys are tackling is just getting people talking about it. There's still a lot of people that are, that just have this old notion, especially men, perhaps, that mental illness is something that you just suppress. You just keep to yourself. You just deal with. Perhaps it's not, manly to admit it, to seek help, etc. So
right. Yeah, definitely. It's depression is so rampant, and it's certainly nothing to be ashamed of. And I think a lot of times it's coming from, it's always, I actually don't think, I know it's always coming from perspective. It's like you're depressed because you're opting for a certain perspective of your reality. And this actually leads really well into what I have as for the quote of the day. So without further ado, here's today's positive pondering and positive pondering breakdown. Break it down again. Ooh, Tears for Fears thrown in the mix there. One of my favorite
classic pick, buddy.
Nice soundbite choice, Dan. Nice. Okay, for the quote of the day, don't search for heaven and hell in the future. Both are now present. Whatever we manage to love without expectations, calculations, negotiations, we are indeed in heaven. Whenever we fight, hate, we are in hell. And that's a Rumi quote. So that's a great, just kind of synchronistically, you chose the story of the day, I chose the quote of the day, and they match up really well. So it's, you've got this idea of in the moment, you can choose your perspective. What are you focused on in any given moment? And if I'm focused on what's wrong, what's bad, what's off, I'm going to be depressed. It's right. Inevitable, and if I'm focused on what's good, what's, the that's something that's worked for me. I've certainly had moments of depression. I think everybody listening has at some point or another. And then, but I would say overall, way less than maybe even the average person. I've just always been, the eternal optimist, always looking at the glass is half full, So that leads to how I'm feeling, and so I think that's such a great quote, because, you're in the present and, we're making it all up anyway. That's what people don't realize. They're choosing these perspectives. I can look at my perspective right now and find all kinds of reasons to be troubled. I can look at my perspective right now and I could give you arguments all day long on why I should be thrilled and ecstatic about my life. I can go either direction if I wanted to. So when you realize that it's all make-believe anyway, you're just making it up, stop reacting to what's happening external of self, go within and consciously choose to be in heaven, right? Instead of hell. So it's actually kind of funny that we made random Satan jokes at the beginning of this podcast right. too. I love it when I see how it all ties together. It's like, am I going to choose to focus on this fiery, negative, character that's a construct, of my imagination essentially, or am I going to choose to focus on, all the beauty and magic that's happening in life? And of course, that's what the whole Positive Head project is about. And, it's like the first one of these we did, these daily podcasts we did a few days ago, I talked about, the quote, you teach best what you most need to learn. And this whole thing, at the end of the day, it's like, I'm talking about this stuff all the time. I'm doing this whole project. We're involved in this whole project because we need it as much as anyone. It's for self first and foremost, and knowing that the people that really resonate with it, that are also on the same vibration and ready to, to kind of understand this information more clearly, or to just kind of take the ride with us. And it's such a beautiful, humbling process just to kind of share, your own vulnerabilities, to share, your own, whatever wisdom you've gleaned from your own life experience. And we certainly want to hear anything from you guys, the listeners, any story that you care to share. We'd love to hear about it. We'd love any questions that you have. I've been saying that. So we are getting a few. I'd love to get some more.
Absolutely. Yes, please. Yeah.
Yeah. So don't search for heaven and hell in the future. It is, and of course, it brings you back to the whole concept of being in the present in general, because you're only ever in the now. The past doesn't exist. Show it. Prove it to me. Prove me your past, Dan. You can't. I guess you could show me a picture, but it's not here. The future, past doesn't ever exist exactly like you imagine it to be. And the future never comes like you imagine it to be. So why are we spending all of our time focused on these two, abstract things? And it's at the cost of the present. It's called the present for a reason. It's a gift.
Definitely.
And one book that really does an amazing job kind of explaining all that is called The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. You've
one of my favorites.
Oh, it's such a great book. Highly recommend it to any of you guys out there listening. And just to give you a little snapshot of it, it talks a lot about dissolution of the ego self, EGO, everybody's greatest obstacle, or edging God out, however you want to interpret it. But basically, this guy, Eckhart Tolle, he was depressed. He was suicidal. He was, just had it with his life. And he was thinking to himself in a very, suicidal moment, I just can't live with myself anymore. Right. And this is something he talks about at the beginning of the book. And all of a sudden it was like a light bulb going on. Like, what do you mean I can't live with myself? It's like there's more than one of me. And he started analyzing, it just led him down this path of comprehension explosion in regards to the ultimate nature of reality and who he is, and his ego self versus his higher self. And the way he puts it is, your higher self is your God self, the observer that's been there, kind of watching in the background since you were an infant, and will be there when you're 95 years old. And your ego self is this surface part of self that is always reacting and needing to feed itself through drama and so forth. And so he gets into this whole state where he realizes, oh my gosh, this observer that's in the background is actually who I'm designed. This is my higher self. It's taken the back seat, and the ego has taken over the front. And actually, a book that we've talked about a lot, Return of the Bird Tribes, talks about this wonderfully. The kind of the story of man's, how man fell into ego consciousness. Out of first we were very connected to our higher selves, and the spirit was really steering the ship. And then over time, in the third dimension, we started Spirit, you don't know what you're talking about. You're not familiar with this arena of physicality. Let the ego take over, and more and more solve things as separate. And how do I, take care of self versus all of us? And so, yeah, Power of Now, highly recommend if any of you guys listening to check that book out and, explore how to, it talks about when the ego flares up, it's like your pain body essentially coming on. And if you can observe it in that moment, as this, hey, that's not you. You think it's you when it's your ego reacting, but really it's just one layer of you, and you can snap into the observer role, and you watch yourself having these moments of lashing out and reaction. And it kind of like, it's like, I think they use the analogy of it's like unplugging the vacuum from the wall. Mm-hmm. The power may run for another few seconds, but it's like you take away the sting, because it's like, hey, hold on. I see you, ego. Have you ever seen that person? They're nice, they're calm, they're cool, they're collective. And all of a sudden it's like something just completely takes them over, and it's a different being you're interacting with. They've moved into the pain body, the ego consciousness. And when you can start differentiating between these layers of self, that is like the beginning of the end for the ego, which has been steering. It's kind of like the passenger is taking control of the plane. And really what we're trying to do here is put the pilot back in control. And as Sting says so well, let your soul be your pilot, right?
Yeah, that was really well said, Bran. And going back 1 second to what we were discussing just a minute earlier, Eckhart Tolle was really exceptional at sort of showing how so much of that dysfunction, the ego dysfunction, really has to do with thoughts, with like an almost exclusively mental thing, right? And of course, emotions really get caught up and wound up in that whole thing as well. But I think that you can all break it down to just thoughts that are out of alignment, that are very negative. And like you said earlier, that's essentially what depression is. I know from my own experience that depression can, of course, come and go. And it's, like you said, it's something that most of us deal with. In the majority of cases, hopefully it's something very, very mild, right?
Yeah.
But I think that in the cases of what we call clinical depression, you just have someone who has been negatively focused for so long that it's just sort of, taking over their thought patterns.
Yeah.
And so at this point, they are compulsively thinking negative things. I saw something similar to that related to this news on the Facebook page of Upworthy. That's where I got this story. Mm-hmm. And there was a cool little photo post, comedian Sarah Silverman, in some quote that she made regarding mental illness, where she, sort of opened up and, admitted that she'd been, dealing with it as well. Something that's, I think, always really cool to see in the media. But unfortunately, some of the comments on the story on Facebook were negative. There were people saying, oh, of course, it's easy for her to, open up about depression. And, of course, she's a celebrity with all this money. So she can, of course, afford to, pay for the treatment or whatnot. And, there were a few comments like this. My first reaction was, this is so negative. This is such a negative reaction to what's essentially a positive story.
Right.
A celebrity opening up about their mental illness. And sure, of course, you can justify looking at it that way and, maybe getting a little, jealous of the attention that someone else gets that you don't get for the same condition. Right. But essentially, my reaction was, this person is still, very much in the throes of this condition. Right. And they're seeing an example of, what it's like to maybe come out the other side. Yeah. And they're somehow reacting negatively. So.
Right. Yeah, you said something really interesting a minute ago. You get in these habitual kind of patterns of thinking negatively, and that becomes your default, default way of perceiving things. The glass is half empty. The glass is half empty. You actually rewire the brain whenever you take similar patterns of thought. It's talked about, explained very well in the documentary, What the Bleep Do We Know? That's another one that I recommend for people that really kind of talks about science and spirituality and how they're merging. And it's a very interesting documentary. If you haven't seen it, check it out. And there's a guy in there who talks about this whole phenomenon, how you actually are rewiring the brain when you start thinking in different ways. It creates these new pathways that they get stronger and stronger, these neural pathways, as you continue to change, So your brain is this malleable, computer. That
extremely so, yeah.
So it's so many people just don't realize like how much it can change and how much power you have over changing all this stuff. And it's just a matter of getting into the right type of habits, and Eckhart Tolle actually talks about in Power of Now, I believe, sometimes it's hard if you're in a negative state to go from a negative state to this super positive state.
Oh, yes.
Right.
Yes.
So instead of reaching from, I feel like absolute crap to I'm on top of the world, go for a neutral thought. Try and, once you observe yourself in this negative state, start going to a neutral thought. And then from there, you can step it up and you take this kind of gradual, snapping yourself out of it. And of course, like all this ties into the whole concept behind, the positive head bracelet, just as a simple visual reminder to focus on what's positive, And so yeah, I think it's interesting how all of this is tied in together randomly today. I love it.
The one thing I was going to mention real quick, but of course, this could be like a whole nother rabbit hole to go down, and maybe we will on another podcast. But so much of dealing with this, and I think that you agree with this, entails wearing down resistance, basically removing resistance from your life, resistance to thoughts that would feel better to you, but for some reason you just cling to the, negative because it just make sense. You know, so much of that I think has to do with
makes sense based off of the perspective you've chosen to adopt.
Exactly. It makes sense from a very sort of, you know, warped perspective.
Well, yeah,
really.
make no mistake. It's a perspective that you've chosen to adopt. Make up some really good perspective. Just make the crap up. It's like, I shouldn't call it crap. It's like good, you know, make it up, make up good stories. Tell new stories. It's all stories anyway. Start telling new stories and you'll see new reflections of those stories. People just don't, you know, so many people don't get it, that it's like life's not happening to you. You're happening to life. You know, it's so powerful once you fully understand it and grasp it. So we're getting kind of low on time here. We're trying to keep these around, you know, these daily podcasts around 30 minutes or so. And so what I would like to do is move along to the question that was written in today. And this,
awesome.
Yeah, this question came from Alan. Alan, thanks for writing in. Alan asked, how can I help people that are less aware? Like, how do I interact with people who maybe have not been exposed to any of this type of information without seeming preachy or without seeming, you know, pushy? And that's certainly something that I've had to wrangle for many, many years. You know, as I've talked about many times before, you know, I've been on this path for almost 20 years. And when I first kind of started opening up to some of these concepts and then, you know, applying them to my life and then, you know, just understanding it more fully and I was so excited about it, you know, so I would talk to anyone who will listen about the ultimate nature of reality and my perspective. Of course. And so oftentimes, whether they wanted to hear it or not.
Right. I have an idea what kind of reactions you were getting.
Yeah. So, I mean, I would get people that, like I often say, it's people like, that's very interesting, or, okay, you're crazy. What are you smoking? And so I've had to, over the years, learn when it's appropriate. And so, Alan, what I would say is, you know, you've really got to just listen to the energy of the moment is really the key thing. What I've noticed is when I feel inspired to talk about stuff around someone, usually that's an indicator for me that I'm supposed to have the talk, as I like to call it. And so I know that part of my own personal task, so to speak, with the shift that's happening on the planet is to just try and, you know, put into words for people, here's my perspective on the ultimate nature of reality. Don't take my word for it. Just be open to the concepts and apply and see for yourself, you know?
Right.
And so what I've found over time is when I feel really charged up about talking about it, then usually that person coincidentally is very responsive and reacts well and is, you know, asking questions and engaged. If I have that feeling and I start down that path and I'm not getting good, you know, reciprocation energetically, then I realize that, hey, this is probably not the appropriate time, place. So really, that's the thing. It's just kind of, it will naturally lead to a conversation. Oftentimes I found too. It's like something random we're talking about will lead and be a perfect segue into, you know, some of these more heady concepts that you may or may not be excited about talking about. And I think that's a normal thing for a lot of people when they first start kind of waking up to
this experience has to be so common for anyone who's just starting down this path. I know it was the case for me. Yeah, that's why I thought the question was so great. When you initially start sort of opening up to any sort of, you know, metaphysical or spiritual view on life, I think it's natural. The first thing you want to do is run and tell everybody. Yeah. Come on, how come you're not seeing this? How come you don't see this?
Yeah. Right. And I think it's really important to respect the fact that we're all on our unique journeys back to source, back to understanding. And it doesn't, you know, and that's something that took me a long time to really get. It's like, it's okay if someone doesn't get it, see it, want to see it, isn't interested. They're, you know, that's a part of experience that is just as valid as any experience that I'm choosing to have, where it's like, I want more information. I want to understand more. I want to, you know, that's great. That's valid too. And that's has its own set of rewards and experiences that come as a reflection. But if there's a being that is still more immersed in separation mentality and, you know, lack of comprehension or understanding in regards to who and what they truly are, their divinity and that what they're connected to and the power that comes with that. How empowering it is to understand you're one with what created all things. Maybe I'm not ready to understand that. I want to experience the part of God that is separation still. The sweet's never quite as sweet without the sour. Maybe that person sitting in the cubicle next to you is fully immersed in the experience of sour. And that's okay, because that's needed for, it's always leading them to where they're going next. And their journey, I always think of it in the terms of, of course, believing in the concept of reincarnation and us being eternal beings that have lived infinite lives. Maybe in the physical dimension, third dimension, that, life on Earth kind of experience, maybe some being that is really immersed in negativity has had 10 lives and you've had 50. Okay, so you're further along in the school of the third dimension than they are. It doesn't mean you're better or worse. They're just, you signed up for this program before they did. And so I think it takes a lot of the judgment out of it. And so, yeah, Alan, just, short answer, just pay attention to what the energy is in the moment. If you're feeling inspired, if you're feeling a reciprocal kind of energy from them, receptivity, I guess, then go with that. If it doesn't feel, listen, it's like everything. Your gut always will tell you what to do next. And the more you pay attention to your inner guidance, the stronger it becomes. You work that muscle, and it's
absolutely, yeah.
It's a great way to live.
I realize that this wasn't necessarily part of the question, but I think it is related. If you are looking to, touch and impact and share what you're learning with other people, and you want to have that sort of conscious positive impact, a lot of times the way to do it, I think, is to just be a role model, to just live that in your life. I think we all know that words only go so far, really, is what it is. And, people like yourself and myself, I think that we can, if we, like you were saying, if we find that inspiration, or if conditions are right, we can be very articulate to, express our point of view, put it in a very sort of compelling way that will make someone else see what we're saying. But what's most natural is for us to apply what we're talking about, because it's just like the most natural way to live according to what we know.
Yeah.
It's the way to be happier, the way to be more fulfilled, to get everything you want. And it sort of has the byproduct or the consequence that other people, when they see how you live your life, they want to be more like you. They want to have what you have. They want to know your secret.
Yep. Yeah. And one comment you said, to get what you want. Well, I think a lot of times you get what you need as well.
Yes.
Maybe in lieu of what you want. But, as I've heard it said, a master is someone who embraces whatever shows up because they realize it's exactly what they need to lead them to the next version of themselves. And if you can move into that perspective, it becomes not resisting what's happening, but rather trying to understand what's happening. All right, everyone. Well, that concludes today's podcast. Thank you guys so much for joining us with this experimental week of doing daily podcast. It's been a lot of fun. Has it been fun for you, Dan?
Oh yeah, it's been a ball.
Yeah,
we'll continue to have more fun, right, Yoda?
Have that, we will.
Yoda? Yoda's here too?
Yeah,
this
he's
is
up there
weird,
in the rafters.
Weird today around here.
I'm looking
Must
at
be
him.
Friday.
Yeah.
Otherwise, everyone, please remember to send in your questions. We'd love to get some more. Thanks so much for the good question today, Alan. And write us, stump us, hit us with something weird. I don't know. Let us know what your thoughts are. We'd love to get some feedback. All right, everyone. Until next time, remember, as long as you ain't dead, you're already positive ahead. Be well, everyone.